Hey, good morning. I'm Undrai Fizer. It's 8:35, and I'm here at my office. My wife is out of town at a meeting, and before I go out to breakfast, I just thought I would share some things with you, kingdom parents, you divine nature parents. This thing that I'm going to talk about is probably not for everybody, and it's okay. But some of you parents who are in certain realms of leadership, not just church leadership, just leadership within the scope of the atmosphere itself, as a result of you being in the body. Sometimes when we say leadership, we think at a particular church, or you're head of a certain auxiliary, or you're a pastor. But those of us who have tapped into the divine mind, and you happen to be a parent, those of us who have tapped into the original mind, who are believers, who are not just carrying the label or what have you, but those of you who are walking in the divine mind, who happen to be parents, who happen to have children, to happen to have family. And I'm going to give you a practical breakdown of this spiritual mastery. So many times we talk about certain revelatory things, and you're writing notes trying to figure it out. But I'm going to talk about the meat and potatoes of family life, of having children, of being a thought leader, of being an influencer, being parents, and having this divine mind. Our household gives us the capacity to really learn about the parenting skills of God. We are put in a situation where we happen to be God in the house. And there are so many times I looked at how God would deal with me as a result of how I would deal with my own children. Because your house is where you are the Lord, and your children are your offspring. And you really begin to see how God deals with us in his parenting as a result of us being parents. And some of you parents who are committed believers, not just going to church and doing all the stuff, but you have transcended life. You are living a kingdom reality. A lot of your kids not going to go for that. And you're going to find yourself having battles in your home with your children, and you're going to see a lot of things. It's not a matter of saved, not saved, church. No. Because a lot of times your children are not looking to walk with God. They're looking for you to be the identity that you left, because that's the identity that they're in. You know, us discovering God does not impute it all in the family. Because even though we are covered, every man's or every individual's decision is their own in the house. And even when parents, we begin to move in the fullness of God, it does not necessarily mean that our children are going to follow suit, because they are independent thinkers and they have a world within themselves. And they feel that your identity is a limited scope and that their world is still the fullness. So whenever you give instruction, they can feel that you really don't understand. But I'm going to explain something to you. Jesus himself said this. He says a man's enemies will be they of his own house. Matthew 10:36. Your issues are not with church members and with people out in the world. Most of your fights, most of the tension that you will face is with your household. God's issues are with his household. You understand what I'm saying? And so you're going to have to continue in your faith and in your life. You're going to have to continue in your mind and in your purpose, because your house is where you practice being God. Your house is where you practice the parenting skills of God. And I'm telling you, those of you who are listening, if you're not parents, you really won't understand everything I'm talking about. But if you are parents, you're going to see what I'm saying. You feel me? Oh, yeah. And that's some of the things that we face in spirituality. Spirituality is not just a everyday collection of revelation and incredible thoughts and hysteria. You have to live. Every day you live, we have to eat. We have to pay bills. We have to change flats. We have to buy cars. We have to pay the bills. We have to cut the yard. Our humanity has a responsibility and how we choose to live our humanity. You see, our spirituality is not just an insurance card for heaven. Our spirituality is the power from which we live our humanness. We just don't say we're human and we're flawed. No, our spirituality is the philosophy and the power from which we live as human beings. And in our living life as human beings, we have children who have not chosen the identity from which to live their humanity. But somehow they see, the demands and the power of spirituality, but they don't choose it when you want them to. They don't shift when you want them to. They live their own pains, their own burdens, their own hurts. You see what I'm saying? And sometimes that can cause a friction in the house, especially when you're living your humanness from a spiritual power from which they don't want no advice from whatsoever. I'm talking about experiences that I've had and things that I've shared and things that have been shared with me. And sometimes that's where the greatest frustration could get is not if the people hear me preach, but do your children listen to you? It's not a matter of if the members hear you speak or if the church hear you preach and receive it or if the people at the revival or the meeting or the conference hears it. But does your family hear you? Does your own personal private kingdom honor you as the divine nature? And sometimes, even though the world may see you as who God is, sometimes your household sees you as who you are. They're not looking at you as a Lord. They're looking at you as Undrai, Jefferson, Maxwell, Woodrow, Monica. They're looking at you. They're not looking at your authority. And that's when you see your biggest tension and test, when your own house don't see the power. Oh, you can speak to a tree and it'll grow. You can speak to the deaf ear outside and it'll happen. You can speak to somebody else's finances and it'll be there. But what can you say to your household? Some of the greatest leaders in the world have troublesome homes. And then the pressure of getting everybody to act accordingly, because we're leaders. And sometimes children resent, especially when they're older and even younger, they can resent trying to look a way that they haven't chosen in their mind. So the first step they get to spirituality is a facade. Because especially if you're a leader and there is a stand or presence that you must carry to be trusted, to be heard, to be paid. And it's a choice they didn't make. They're looking for mom and dad. They're not looking for a leader. They're not looking for a teacher. They're not looking for an author. They're not looking for a doctor. People all over the country would call me, wordsmith and Dr. Fizer. My children was like, we're looking for daddy. We're looking for daddy. We're not looking for a doctor. I used to talk to my children when they were young, and my oldest son, Benjamin, and I was just talking. And my oldest son used to say, but daddy, you talking to me like you talking to a client. I'm like, no, I'm just talking. They don't realize when you live this life of the spirit that's one life. Because sometimes children's mind is still compartmentalized. I'm at school, I'm at home, I'm with my girlfriend, I'm with my boyfriend. They're still thinking from a compartmentalized situation. They're not realizing you're living one life. And it's like you're on all the time. They feel they feel when you're a teacher or a leader that you're at work. And when that's finished, You leave that there. And sometimes that's the tension. And I've seen ministry tear families apart. Leaders who are actually living authentically. It can tear families apart, not if you teach them to pray, not if you teach them to preach, not if you teach them to go with you to the meeting, but it's a differentiation of consciousness and mentalities. And sometimes the spirit of wisdom will have to deal with a person's household differently. Because your children and people in your households, your relatives, are going to have to come to a knowledge themselves, not just a religion, because all of us can go to church together, but all of us don't meet the Lord together. All of us can occupy the same religious space, but all of us don't connect with God together. Am I making sense? Raise your hand. All of us don't connect with the spirit of the church together. We all go to church together. We can all pray together and put on the suits together, but all of us don't meet the Lord together. And it could create a tension in the house. Jesus said a man's enemies are they that are in his household, because your household feels they know you more than anybody else. They know your qualms. They done heard you pass gas. They done seen you not bathe. They done smelled you. They've smelled your breath. They've smelled the restroom after you left. They see you leave dishes in the room. They see you leave dishes on the table. They know your qualms. They know your living. They know what upsets you. They've seen you be upset at work and at ministry and bring it home and talk about it. And they don't want to be a ministry house. They don't want that. They just want a roof. You understand what I'm saying? And so he said, your enemies are they that give you most grief would be those who love you. But God has a sense of humor because he gives us children, and we begin to practice God, the parenting skills of God in our house. God is everything. He's a blessing. He's incredible. But yet his own household can despise him because we don't get what we want. We could despise our own father. We don't want to listen to the advice of our father or the wisdom of our father. We think we know it all. We think we know better. Children are like that. Children could say, I'm a man, I want this on your dime. They can live defeated and rebellious on your dime, and you pay for it. Just like we too can live rebellious and without path, without knowing where we're going on God's dime, but we want him to wake us up in the morning, and we want him to heal us and give us a job. See, God is humorous. He allows us to see his parenting skills by parenting our children. And come to find out, God's biggest enemies are there in his house. Jesus said you're going to find a lot of misunderstanding in your household, not just with your children or your husband and your wife, but they that are your family, those who know you in a certain way beyond your decision, beyond the spiritual power that's empowering your humanity. Because everyone doesn't want the power that's giving you power. So I'm talking practically. I'm talking everyday meat and potatoes. You can cover your family. You can pray over them. And it's good. It'll give you peace. But sometimes your family don't want to be you. They don't want to be what you say or what's leading you. That's why all of us are going to make our own set of mistakes. We're going to have our own set of sins, our own problems. Because even though we are occupying the same space together, we're not always meeting the Lord together. I can't force my household to see the Lord. I could say, look at me. It's not enough because they're not turned on by the Lord in me. They may be turned on by my money, but they're not turned on by my principles. They will have to fall on their own faces. They will have to meet their own walls. And we just pray that when they do fall, that it's enough to make them see that the fall won't be final. That's the only thing we could do. as parents, and I'm talking to you as parents out there who are walking in divine identity, and sometimes your household won't affirm that you're walking in it. Strangers can affirm that you're anointed, but sometimes your house won't affirm that you're anointed. Sometimes your cousins won't affirm. Sometimes your mother won't affirm. Sometimes your wife won't affirm. Sometimes your children won't affirm. Your household won't always affirm that you're anointed. They just affirm that you live there too. You feel me? So parents who happen to be leaders, I could say don't be discouraged, but I can't tell your emotions to feel any certain way. Just stand where you are. You don't have to speak peace, just be the peace and know peace for yourself. And still know that that's your house. And if there is any disagreement or disengagement, you can say, hey, still parent. God is that way too. If you want to be lost, he's like, hey, God is not in this heaven and hell debate. Because we all live where we're at most peace. We all live where we are at the most peace at. And some people may find peace lost. Some people won't find peace in paradise. And God's not going to force you to a paradise you don't have peace in. God is not sending people to heaven or hell. We exist and live where we find the most peace. And if we find peace with being outside of God, he's not going to force you and put pain on you to make you live with him. We all are happy where we are at most at peace. And most of us are at peace being lost. Most of us are at peace out there and over there. I'm not in peace with peace. And if I'm not at peace with peace, then that peace is going to be hell. If I'm at peace with hell, then hell is going to be heaven. You understand? So we could get all in the spiritual revelation with the Bible. And listen, let's just look at the truth. To you parents, to you adults who have chosen not just to be saved, but to live your humanity from a spiritual power, your household is not going to rally around that. Some may respect you, what you're doing, but everybody in the household will not rally. And it's a blessing when everyone is authentically in. Now that's a blessing. That's a blessing when a person's family is all authentically in. But the presentation can be one thing, but you never know what the whole family is authentically in until they must make difficult decisions. When they must make life-altering decisions, then you will see what the family. So sometimes you have to wait for them to come around. You understand what I'm saying? Just don't lose heart. Don't lose heart. Jesus said, Matthew 10:36, a man's enemies will be the members of his household. Not just your household, your friendhold, your relationships, not just people at work, but your household. People up close. People up close. The world can see you as a master of wisdom. And sometimes your household can say, oh, I see you trying to do a little something. You notice how your family is always a little something you do? Everybody else can see you as an influencer of the world. But sometimes your household or people up close, oh, I see you doing that little something. You know, it's all. And so you got your mind, because somewhere in our life, we want our household to affirm us. That's why it's so hard. Because we don't live with the world. We live at home. We don't live with the people who like our statuses or buy our books. We're constantly in the presence of people who watch us when we're writing. And that's where you find your most affirmative ability and power and acceptance is in your house. You know it's true when everyone up close will say it's true. But maybe that's our test on personal legitimacy. Maybe that's our test to see how legitimate we are when the people up close don't affirm it. Because you and I are more closer to ourselves. You are more closer to you than your family. And I am more closer to me than my family. So sometimes the household, and I'm going to go, sometimes the household is not just the people around it, your brothers and sisters and children and your mom and daddy. Sometimes the household is your own thoughts and your own feelings and your own heart. Sometimes your household is not just the bloodline of the people around you and your children. Sometimes the household is the members of your own consciousness, the members of your own mind, the members of your own heart. And if the members of your own heart turn against you, oh my God, you're in trouble. If the members of your own mind and the members of your own consciousness and the members of your own heart and the members of your own mind, if the household of your mind turned against you, something's up. Sometimes the enemies of a man is they and his members. Do your members call you illegitimate? Does your mind call you illegitimate? Do your thoughts and your heart call you illegitimate? Does your inner family say you're illegitimate? See, you have to know. Sometimes these battles are not to tell you that you're nothing. It's to remind you that you're something. Because sometimes being a leader, your kids don't always follow the presentation. They're offended that they have to look a certain way that they don't want to look. How come your choice have to make me decide? Children can be mad. How come your spiritual choice is forcing me to make a choice I'm not ready to make? And do I have to make this to make you look good? Some children could look at their parents and say, do I need to choose this to make you look good for people? Because I'm not trying to look good for them. Children could be more independent in their thought because we have to look good. We have to look proper and prosperous to the world that we're trying to gain trust from. But our children are not trying to gain trust from the world we're trying to help. They're not trying to gain any trust from our audience. Our children don't even care about our audience. They care about their girlfriends and boyfriends and what they're going to wear and stuff. They're not caring about our audience, and they could be mad at us and angry and offended at us for allowing the audience in the house to affect how they think. You feel what I'm saying? Yeah. So give it time. Give it time. And keep living. Because sometimes the greatest enemies are those who's close to you. I'm Undrai. Peace. I'm Undrai Fizer. This is Undrai Fizer. Jason Smith. Sorry.